Hello, everyone. This is Marc Sabatella from Outside Shore Music, producers of Mastering MuseScore. So this is my MuseScore Café. It's been a long-running series. It's not going anywhere. Lots of changes going on, but this is still great fun, right? So this is the first Wednesday of the month, and we always do, well, for the last couple of years anyhow, we've been doing an Ask Me Anything session, and that means literally ask me anything. And, mostly we ask questions, talk about MuseScore. And, that's what I expect. But I expect also if you still have questions about everything having to do with the site changes and all, I can try to address some of that as well. So yeah, we'll see what comes up today. But I'm looking forward to seeing what people are working on and what I can be helping with today. So, I see one question already from Peter, and this is about the count-in feature. So there's a handful of things that were present in MuseScore 3 that have not made it over to the new interface for MuseScore 4. I say new, it's a year old, right? But there's a handful of things that haven't made it over, and that is one of them. So MuseScore 3 used to have a way that you could go to a special panel and click a special option, and then it would click 4 times before it starts playback. That is not in MuseScore 4. So if you want to hear some clicks or something before you start playback, the way to do that would be to insert a measure, press the insert key on your keyboard or whatever shortcut is working for you for inserting measures, and have a drum set staff and enter for claves or whatever. It's not ideal, not even close to ideal, but yeah, that sort of thing. Features having to do with using MuseScore as a kind of playback aid, like a practice aid, those haven't been prioritized very highly yet. So someone who uses MuseScore as a practice aid, it would be lovely if someone who's has development experience could implement those features. Like that's missing. The fact that the piano keyboard doesn't show the keys as you play them, although I think someone is working on that now. So in any case, yeah, things having to do with using MuseScore as a play-along aid are some of the specific features that are probably the most not present in MuseScore 4. But in MuseScore 3, I should fire that up also. In MuseScore 3, you can get that by going to, let's see, you go to, I use this so seldom, that feature, but if you go to View Play Panel, there'll be this count in here, and if you enable that count in there, it will do that for you. So yeah, that's something to be aware of. Okay, so what else? What else can I answer here? So as far as the login, anyone who's here already has presumably figured out the login thing, but if you missed all my previous messages on the subject, you will indeed need to reset your passwords. Everyone who has an account here on what used to be community.masteringmusescore.com is now community.outsideshore.com. It's the exact same site. It just changed URLs, but it no longer shares login information with my old school site on Teachable. And so that means all the same accounts exist here, but it can no longer access your account information from Teachable, so you have to reset your passwords. So obviously you've all figured that out, or you wouldn't be able to be posting here. But if anyone hasn't figured that out and you're only listening because you haven't figured out how to log in, that's what you need to do. So if you're watching this as a visitor, then that's what you'll need to do to reset your password. All right, so Kevin is asking about recents not showing up. So let's see. If you go, so I'm assuming, Kevin, that you mean when you talk about the main page, you mean this screen here, the home page, which is what shows up when you first start MuseScore. And it should be showing recent files. So if something isn't showing up there, normally that would mean one of two things. It would either mean maybe you have 2 different windows open and that score is still open, because I think it doesn't, I forget at what point the open file list gets updated, if it gets updated when you open the file or when you close the file or when you save the file or what. But it could be that if there's like multiple windows open, one window isn't seeing changes made in another window. So that's possible. Another possibility is that file was deleted or moved. If you moved it to another folder, that would also uh, um, if you have moved the file to another folder, that would also prevent it from not showing up. Another thing is there is now new and recent, and there's also My Online Scores. And this is showing you what's on MuseScore.com. And you'll notice everything has the cloud icon. So if you're on the wrong tab, you wouldn't be seeing it. So that's all I can tell you that I know. Is those are the things that I know might cause it to not show up there. But hopefully the file is still there. If you can find the file there in whatever folder you saved it to, just open it up again and it should show up in the recent list. So maybe give that a shot and then let me know how that goes. All right, so Peter's talking about the home and end key, which don't actually work any differently that I'm aware of than before, but I think they don't work the way a lot of people imagine them working. So give me a second here. Home, what end does, like I'm going to press the end key right now. End has moved the view of the score to the end, but it doesn't change what is selected, right? It has just changed where the view of the score displays. If I press home, now you can see I'm back at the beginning and that same measure is still selected. Just to be sure that we see that that's happening, I'm going to select some other measure. I'll press end, it goes to the end, which shows me the end but doesn't change the selection. And home goes to the beginning and doesn't change the selection. This is, as far as I can recall, the way it's always worked, and it's pretty important because we might want to go to the end and then shift click some specific measure near the end, and we want to keep that original selection, right? So that shift click selects from here to there. So the question is, how would you actually select the beginning of the score? Well, Control Home is the way to do that. Control Home will actually select the very first thing in your score, which is normally the initial bar line of the first measure. Control End selects the last thing in your score, which is usually the final bar line of the last measure, last staff. I'm going to flip over to MuseScore 3 just to verify this. Home goes to the beginning. Let's see. Come on. End goes to the end, but you'll see nothing is selected. Home goes to the beginning. Let me select a random measure. Home goes to the beginning. End goes to the end. Home goes back to the beginning, but I'm still just that same measure. So home and end reposition the view. Control home, control end actually change the selection. Does that make sense? And then therefore, and that's true in I think all versions of MuseScore. And then also, as a kind of corollary to that, shift control end is how you select to end of score. So if I want to click this first measure here of the alto sax and select that entire staff to the end of the score, it's going to be shift, control, end. And that selects all the way to the end of the score. It doesn't actually move the view to the end, but if you do that by pressing end, you'll see it there. So that's, something that behavior is kind of borrowed from other programs as well. And of course, control means command on Mac. There's all that usual stuff. But yeah, it does take maybe a minute to sort of wrap your brain around what that really means. Okay, let's see what else I may have missed here. So Tom is asking about updating mandolin. Oh, and then it scrolled away, so I lost it. Updating. So you mean actually adding mandolin to MuseSounds. So I don't know. I mean, the MuseSounds team is like they exist in their own world. It's the StaffPad team. So StaffPad is another notation program that it works only on tablets. It was originally for Microsoft Surface. Now it's also iPad. I don't know if there's an Android version, but it's a tablet notation program that the Muse Group, the company that owns MuseScore, now also owns StaffPad, and it's the StaffPad team that developed MuseSounds. It's based on the sound library that they had. So they're kind of off in their own world, and we don't have a whole lot of insight into what they're doing. But you'll notice Muse Guitars says Volume 1, which strongly indicates that they are planning on adding more sounds to it, and I wouldn't be surprised to see mandolin, ukulele, and other things become part of that. So that's about all I can tell you about that. That presumably it's being worked on, but the next priority I know for them is marching percussion. I think there's going to be a marching percussion Muse Sounds library released. Well, I will go on a very short limb, and I mean a very safe limb, and say it's almost certainly this year, but it could actually be in the next few months. Okay, next question is about ledger lines and switching. So, and Chayana's comment here about okay, so this is like a couple other things. So yeah, there's a couple different aspects to this question. If you are writing for piano, I will say never use 8VA below the top staff. Switch the top staff to bass clef before you use 8VA below the top staff. Similarly, never use 8VA above the bottom staff. If you feel like you got some high notes, switch to treble clef. So you should never normally be doing either of those things. So we're only talking about going above the top staff or below the bottom staff. And I'm going to create a new score here, Control N, and just create one, and I'll add piano for now. And then depending on what questions we get, I'll add other instruments. So I'll create a grand staff score here. And I want to show you something here. If I add a high G, now I'm going to add an A right now. So I just told you that that was an A. But I ain't going to lie. If I looked at that, I don't know that that's an A. My brain starts to explode. If I was a flute player or a violin player, I might more easily be able to read those ledger lines out of context like that. As a pianist, that's kind of hard for me. So I would not want to see just that. I would want to see the 8VA line. I'd want to see, an A an octave lower with an 8VA. However, check this out now. I'm going to go to note input mode, and I'm going to add this A an octave below. All right, now it's obvious that that's an A, right? So context matters. Another reason why context matters is the following. All right, now this is obvious that that's an A because I'm going up by steps, right? So context matters. I wouldn't try to put in place a hard and fast rule that says this many ledger lines. What I will say is, 3 ledger lines, maybe 4 is as many as I would safely kind of always consider. 3 for me. That's my personal thought. But there's also consideration of how crowded is your page, and are you going to save room by is the octave line going to allow you to save room? Right here, I don't know that it would because the octave line itself takes up space. But, if there's a lot of stuff way above, then clearly the octave line could save space. All right. And then exact same thing for below, but it is definitely true also that bass clef ledger lines are more common. You don't see the 8VA below or 8 below very often in piano music. It's not unheard of, but what often happens when you play notes that low is that they are, in fact, in octaves like that. So you get situations like this very often. That C right there is already as low as, that's the lowest C there is. I guess this A here is the lowest A on the piano. And if you play this in octaves like that, that's totally readable, right? I don't need the octave sign for that. So that's one reason, because low notes on the piano are so often used in octaves, I think that's one reason. It's almost like, why bother playing that note if you don't do it in octaves? That's not literally true, but so often those low notes you support with octaves like that. Okay, so let's see what else I have here. Steiner's asking, about second time only, tacit first time, and also to do so in specific voices. Okay, so the idea of being able to have a repeated section and have one section to be played second time only, that is absolutely been on the list of things that everyone would love to see happen. And so there's guy Johan, who did a whole lot of the work on repeats in general for MuseScore 3 and 2 actually, did a whole lot of work kind of cleaning up the code, improving the Volta playback features, and he's got like the best, I think, insight into how the repeat system all works. And he has laid the groundwork, from my understanding, and I don't know that he's here today, but if he is, he could pipe up. Um, uh, but my understanding is that he has laid the groundwork for eventually making that sort of thing possible. But no one has yet developed the user interface to say, okay, this is how we're going to actually hook it all up. And that is also on the radar. The people who are kind of in charge of the MuseScore user interface design have that on their radar as well. So it's coming some point. It's definitely on the radar and achievable based on how the code is. It just requires people to actually finish the work, basically. Um, so that's my comment there. Colin, yes, I did get your email, and unfortunately, like this is a crazy busy day for me. I'm doing this, and then I'm out the rest of the day, so I probably won't be able to really look at your thing. I'll try to see if I can look at it this afternoon, but more likely it won't be till tomorrow. But we'll see. Okay, so. Let's see. So counterpoint coming up. Nice to get early instruments in the instrument list. And yes, so what I would suggest, absolutely, if you have a list of the instruments you'd want to see, like I've never heard of the serpent or the racket, if you can produce me a list of the name of the instrument, its playable range, like what its lowest note it can play, what its highest note it can play, if it's a stringed instrument, what the most common tuning of those strings is, and what sound is the closest sound. Like there was a discussion yesterday about charango that was on one of the social media channels. People talking about a charango, which is an Andean instrument that's roughly in the ballpark of either a mandolin or a ukulele in terms of its size and sound, right? It's closer to that than, say, a guitar. It's a small guitar, but yeah, it's maybe more mandolin-like. So in that case, we'd want to know which existing sound would be the best default to use because, yeah, there's probably not going to be new sounds added for these obscure instruments, but it's very easy to add entries in this database of what all the instruments are. So we need the name, the range, like its lowest note, its highest note, its tuning, if it's a stringed instrument, and what the closest sound should be for playback. Once you post all that information, I will then submit that to GitHub, and someone should be able to get it taken care of. All right, Mike is asking about adding tuplet numbers to second bar triplets. Unfortunately, okay, so your image isn't coming through, but let me look at it. Uh, all right, so I see your image now. So the second bar, okay, so there's a couple things that I see going on here. One is never do this. I mean, unless this is something you think Debussy actually did, don't be putting pedal marks between the staves. That's not a thing. I mean, it could be a thing that some experimental composer has tried to write for some reason, but no, that's not normally a thing. So only put the pedal markings below the staff, and don't do this either. Don't have your angle brackets not line up. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't tell me as a pianist what to do. This line here should simply be extended to line up with that one there. So that first. So I guess the next question is, what do you mean about the triplets? Because I'm not quite following what you mean about the triplets. It looks like you've entered triplets into both measures. Is this your score, or you're trying to copy someone else's? That's what I'm not clear about either. But it looks like you've entered the triplets and then hidden the triplet numbers, which is not a bad idea. Not a bad idea if you've got a whole bunch of triplets to hide the numbers after the first bunch. So so there you go. So let's see if I can enter exactly that, all right? I'm going to enter So I had triplet numbers in the second bar. So yeah, I don't know how you got rid of them. You must have made them invisible because normally they would be there. But let me go ahead and just enter that myself. So I'm going to enter just the bottom staff, and then I'm not going to worry about. Well, let's get the notes right. I'm going to make it be in C sharp. I mean, not C sharp, E sharp or C sharp minor by adding 4 sharps. And it's so here's a case where, think about that ledger line thing. I said never go with ledger lines above the bass clef staff. I'm going to stand by that. Would it be worth having written this in treble clef? Maybe. Would it be worth using cross staff notation, moving this A to the top staff? Maybe. It would be worth knowing how Debussy wrote it in his own hand. It would be worth comparing different editions of it to see how different editors chose to do that. But that's totally fair game. Different editors will make different calls about that, unless it's an Urtext edition, in which case it will follow exactly what Debussy wrote. So there's a triplet, and this isn't, so I can tell by the shape of this, is what I was getting at, that that's an A major triad. So it's not bothering me too much, but yeah, if I was writing it, I would have thought harder about that. So 5, Control 3, C, whoops, not that octave, but up here, E, A, and then a quarter rest, whoops, a quarter rest, 5, 0, another quarter rest, and then the G sharp, B, G sharp, D sharp, B triplet. So 5, Control 3, G sharp, D sharp, B, right? So I've got that first measure entered. Let's do the second measure. 5, Control 3, A, C sharp, F sharp. Helps that I kind of know the piece. 5, 0, 0, and then come down in E triad. E, oops, Control Z, I oops a lot, and then Control Z. 5, Control 3, E, B, G sharp. So I got my notes in for the bottom staff. Now I'll leave note input mode, and let's get the pedal marking in. So I'm not sure, but what I said is the pedal marking should probably change right there where the chord does. So I'm going to select exactly that. Select from here to there, and enter that pedal marking by going to the keyboard palette and clicking the appropriate symbol. Yeah, just this guy right here is good. And that goes to there, and then I select from this point to that point where the next chord changes, and enter this guy. And then I select from this point to that point and enter that same symbol again. So that's the process, and if you do it right, they line up. And then if you decide that, hey, you know what, those 3s are getting distracting, select them and press V, and now they're invisible. Click this one and press V, and now you've got invisible triplets there. So that's how you should be doing it. So I'm not sure what you actually did, but hopefully seeing that demonstration helped. And if not, feel free to ask further questions. Okay, so now Peter's asking about making a part invisible but still hearing it. I actually, I think I shared a video on that like a couple months ago. But yes, the way to do this has changed since MuseScore 3, and I think it's about to change again in MuseScore 4.3 to simplify it. But let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and add an oboe, and I'm going to make this oboe have notes. Let's get some sound back at a reasonable level. And I want to make this oboe go away, but still hear it. If I play it right now, right, we hear it. Lovely sound. Okay, nice little piece I've written. Okay, if I want to make it go away, I'm going to go to the instruments panel. If I make the instrument go away, it does indeed make it silent also. But instead of hiding the instrument, what we're going to do is we're going to expand the instrument and hide its staff. So the instrument is still present as far as this score is concerned, but the staff is not. And now it will play. So that is the way it's done in MuseScore 4. As I said, in 4.3, they're going to have more controls over this to give additional controls above and beyond what was even present in previous releases. So Mike, you are selecting across both staves. So that was the problem. Yeah, don't do that. Just select the bottom staff, and that's how you do it. Now, there is an important point to make about that. What if I wanted to add a pedal marking on this bottom staff that changed on beat 3? There's no way to do that. I can't select only the first 2 beats of this measure because there's nothing there, right? There's nothing there. So here's what I need to do. I'm going to have to go into voice 2. So I'll switch to voice 2. I used Control Alt 2, enter myself a couple of half rests, and then I can select and then make them invisible. So I'll make both of those invisible by pressing V, and now I can select just that much and use this thing, and it will do that. So if you need the pedal to change somewhere where the left hand doesn't have a note, and that absolutely happens. Absolutely happens. You'll have to use this invisible rest trick. This is probably the single biggest annoyance to the people who are most in charge of MuseScore right now, Martin and Bradley. This is something that will happily yell and scream about in a nice way. But they are very anxious to see that whole system improved so that it's possible to have pedal lines and especially hairpins, crescendos and so forth, and in the middle of a measure or in the middle of a long note without having to attach to a note. It's been a high priority for them both since they became involved on the project a couple years ago, and it'll probably happen this year. Some of the code is in place already. I don't think it's happening for 4.3, but 4.4 maybe? We'll see. Okay. All right. So Marla is asking about brackets on triplets. So first of all, let me explain the usual rules of notation as far as triplets go. Normally, you don't use a bracket if the notes are all beamed. That is the usual rule. If and only if the notes are all beamed. So if you have notes like this, where the notes are all 3 beamed together, you normally don't show a bracket. That's the standard rule of music notation. Not to say that some editors don't decide to implement their own rules sometimes. But so that's the standard way of doing it. If you want to do something non-standard, what you do is select that 3, select the triplet, and then come over to the properties panel, and instead of saying number, this is how you could also make the number go away, right? By clicking none there or number. But this is also where you can force the bracket to display if you want. Normally, the bracket isn't used. And so if this had been quarter note triplets, like 6, Control 3, now you get a bracket. So the bracket normally displays, let me move this to a more reasonable octave. There we go. The bracket normally displays if the notes aren't beamed. And that also includes all sorts of cases where 2 of the notes are beamed, but the third one's not because it's part of a different grouping. Anytime there's not a beam that really clearly tells you what the triplet is, there should be a bracket. Anytime there is a beam that clearly tells you what the triplet is, there shouldn't be a bracket. That's the normal rule to follow. But yeah, MuseScore provides those options there in the properties panel specifically because it's the normal rule doesn't mean there aren't exceptions. Just like normally you show the 3. But if this whole piece is nothing but triplets, which it is, if you all know that piece, right? It's the whole piece, or at least that whole beginning, is based on triplets. And in those cases, it is very common to therefore want to not show all those 3s. Moonlight Sonata is always the example that I give of a piece that's like all triplets, and so you stop showing the 3s. Let me show you one important thing here. So have you seen his original manuscript, or are you going off of like a first edition, what the editor did? Because what the editor did could be very different from what Debussy himself did. But yeah, if you've looked at an Urtext edition or someone scanned in his actual handwritten original or something, that would be certainly interesting to know. But often, composers, when they write in their own hand, are writing for themselves, and then they hand it off to an editor and expect the editor to fix things like that. So normally an editor, and the no time signature, that's just laziness, right? So normally an editor would put that, add that kind of stuff. Yes, it's pretty typical that a composer gets pretty lazy about issues like that because they know there's going to be an editor to deal with it for them. So anyhow, let me show you this thing about this. I selected that number and made it invisible. Let me make it visible again for now. Let me select this, come over to the Properties panel, and choose Number Type None. All right, now there's no 3. And then I start editing, and then I change my mind and say, oh, I want to get that number back. How do you do it? If I try clicking, I can't, there's nothing to click there. That's the advantage of making it invisible instead of using the Properties panel to make it go away. It's hard to see how you can select that. The question is, can we get there? I'm going to try what I hope will work, but I don't have high hopes. I'm going to try pressing Alt right arrow. I'm going to select that first note and Alt right arrow. That went to the pedal line. Alt right arrow again. Let's try that again. Alt right arrow, Alt right arrow. Nope, just went to the next note. So yeah, it doesn't look like Alt left and Alt right are getting me to that triplet thing. So how would I select it? Well, I could select all 3 notes and then come over to the Properties panel and hope that MuseScore is noticing that there's a triplet and giving me these options. But as you can see, it isn't. So that's like, this is an issue, right? It's not going to, if you make the numbers go away that way, you might have just hosed yourself. If someone knows a way to fix that, let me know. But I'll show you my trick. I just deleted one note to force the bracket to appear, because as soon as those notes aren't beamed together, you get a bracket. Now I've got a bracket I can select, and I can bring my number back and then add my note back. So that's my horrible hack, is if you can do anything that forces a bracket to appear, hiding the note, breaking the beam, whatever, it'll force the bracket to appear, and then you can select the thing. That is my my method. Okay. So I've had time to deal with questions in some depth here and talk about other aspects. First question I have for you now is, did I miss any questions so far? I don't think so. So I need more questions. More questions, please. Let me tell you a few things meanwhile while I wait for some questions to come in. I'm just going to flip over and show you the site and talk a little bit more about what's actually going on here, what you can maybe look forward to. I'm still kind of rearranging little bits about what's going on with these spaces here. For those of you who are gold level members or are thinking of becoming ones, I do plan to so first of all, you're seeing Practical Counterpoint listed here because I've already created the shell for the course, but there's no content. I mean, I haven't copied over all the videos from the old version of the course. I will be doing that over the next couple of weeks and launching the course sometime in the next couple of weeks, but I don't want to announce a launch date until all the dust has settled from this whole changeover thing. And I'm still getting, people saying, oh, I lost my access to this course, or this, my login isn't working here, and trying to fix issues there. So until I get all that kind of stuff straightened out, I don't want to announce a start date for the Counterpoint course, but it should be within the next couple of weeks. So anyhow, the Counterpoint course will live here, but I'm going to simplify what's going on with these workshop and project spaces. Circle is about to be implementing a new feature that's going to help me do that, and we'll see how quickly that how quickly that happens if I can take advantage of this new feature that will allow it. Oh, speaking of new Circle features, those of you who are signed up for any course are going to love this. As of sometime in the last week or two, the website will now start tracking your video progress. So if you start watching a lesson that's like a 10-minute long lesson in one of the courses or any of the videos on the site, you start watching a video, you get 3 minutes in, and then you get called away to dinner and you close the window. When you come back to that same lesson, it will remember where you left off. Trivial thing that you would think, yeah, most video, like YouTube certainly remembers where you left off. Not all sites do, but anyhow, Circle now does. So all the courses here now have that improvement. Oh, creating an OSIA. So yeah, that's a fun thing. So let's talk about that. An ossia. So what that is say I put in a trill here, and I put in a trill here, and let me just go through that process. I'll select that little range there. For trills, you don't have to select a range if it's only one note, but for a lot of lines, you do want to select a range, so I'm going to do that. So I'm going to add the trill first from the ornaments palette, and then you decide you want to have a little small measure above that. Right? You want a small measure above this that shows like a suggested playback kind of a thing. So here's how, there's a lot of ways to do it. I'm going to show you, well, first, yeah, I'm going to show you what's the best way. It's just the best way, all right? I'm going to add another staff. I'm going to come over to the instruments panel. And this one's a little bit involved. It'll take a minute, but, you know, that's what we're here for, right? So I'm going to go to the instruments panel, expand the piano instrument so I can see its two staves, and I'm going to add a third staff. And I'm going to drag that staff up to the top. And also there's up and down buttons at the top of the instruments panel. So if drag's not a thing, you can use the up and down buttons at the top of the instruments panel. You have to sort of navigate your way there by keyboard. But it is possible to rearrange those staves so that new staff is on the top. Now that that new staff is on the top, I'm going to do a couple of things. One is, let's enter the notes. Let's just say it was going to be, oops, it's going to be 16th notes. So D. Okay, let's say that's going to be how I want to enter it. I've entered the notes there. What I want to do now is okay, so I'm going to first show you what doesn't really work, but you might have scores in which you've tried this. If you come over to, oh no, still on the instruments panel, sorry. I'm going to reopen up the piano. If I click the gear icon for that new staff, you'll see there's an option here that says hide all measures that do not contain notation. Well, that's great. Cutaway. This is what I want. I want this. I want small staff, and I want to hide all instruments that do not contain notation. Well, this is kind of cool. It kind of did the right thing. But I say kind of. What it also did was it left a bunch of empty blank space. It left a bunch of empty blank space above the other staves because it's hiding those measures, but it's not reclaiming the space. It's still taking up space in the score. So this panel doesn't get you all the way there. To get all the way there, oh, and let me just put in a final note there also. I'll just put in a half note B. I'm going to right-click that measure and go to Measure Properties. No, not Measure Properties, sorry. I will right-click it and go to Staff Properties. In Staff Properties, I have to do one other thing, which is set Hide When Empty to Always. Now, it also reclaims the empty space. So it still has the cutaway thing, but it no longer is allocating extra space for that staff. In doing that, was Peter, were you the one that pointed out that as soon as I did that, it messed up the clefs? Well, that is absolutely true. No, someone had pointed out in one of my videos, I used that hide empty staves cutaway thing, and in the process, the clefs got messed up. Well, it just happened here. Y'all see that? The clefs are now messed up. It somehow, when I hid that staff, it reassigned the clefs in some way, and I don't know how, why. Let me undo that. So everything is good, and then I redo it, and the clefs are wrong. So there's obviously a bug here, and I had not been able to reproduce that. When someone pointed it out, just like a couple weeks ago, they pointed out that one of my videos showed that, the clef going wrong, and then I saw it happen in the video, and then I tried to retrace my steps and reproduce it, and I couldn't. Well, now I've got another example of it. So I don't know why that bug exists, but I do know I can select the clef and fix it. So there you go. So yeah, ossia is kind of an obscure term. It's one of the more obscure terms in music for something that we've kind of seen fairly often, many of us. Did I hide when empty always? Okay, now it's still got empty space, but I think it's just because the score is short enough to not need more space. But anyhow, that's the thing. Okay, so let's see what else I've got questions. So anyhow, that's the process. You add the staff, get it to the right position, usually above the staff. Then you enter your notes. And then in the instruments panel, you make that staff both small, use that gear icon there, the settings icon to make it small, and hide measures that do not contain notation. I believe this little pop-up that has those might not be accessible in all screen readers. So this is one of the things where I think there's like known issues with accessibility, but those same options are available if you do manage to right click this staff and get to staff part properties, which also has had accessibility issues, but I think in 4.2.1 that's fixed. Someone could let me know, but I think it's now the case. Well, in fact, let's find this out. I'm going to click this staff. On my computer, the shortcut to get into staff part properties is, I think, Shift F10. Yeah, Shift F10 is the shortcut to open up a context menu. And if I now go down to staff part properties, it does open up staff part properties and looks like it has the right staff. So I believe previous versions, this didn't really work right. You'd get to staff part properties and it would be empty. It wouldn't have the right stuff in it. So anyhow, it does look like you can get to all the necessary options by screen reader and keyboard: cutaway, small staff, and hide when empty. So those are the options you want: hide when empty always, small staff, and cutaway. Do that after you've entered notes, because otherwise the staff will disappear as soon as you do that. Okay. All right. Peter's asking about playable range being off by an octave. So yes, so if you are entering notes onto a bass staff, so do you have the whole context here so I can see the rest? Yes, what happens here is these, and of course I can't necessarily tell from just a picture, but if you add a bass instrument in your score, let's go ahead and do that. If I add a bass instrument, I'll go to the instruments panel, type bass, and you're saying acoustic bass notation. I'll just put in acoustic bass. There we go, acoustic bass here. By default, it gives me a bass clef, and of course now the bracket is also messed up and I'm just going to drag that to fix it. As soon as you start hiding staves, that same thing that caused the clefs to get messed up will also cause brackets to get confused about where they cover. There's, little glitches like this that have been present in MuseScore for many, many years, and I've fixed many of them myself, and it's like one of these things where as soon as you fix one problem, you cause a problem somewhere else. This has been an ongoing fight for 10 years to what happens when you hide empty staves, what gets fixed, what happens as a result. So that's doesn't surprise me at all when I see glitches like that. I've been fighting them for 10 years. Okay, so that's E here. That's E there. This is the low E on a bass, right? This is the lowest E. So yes, it sounds an octave lower than written. So when writing for bass, you write an octave lower than you want it to sound. The same is true for guitar. And I will say not everyone is really that aware of that. If you've never really had to think through this before, you could easily be excused for thinking that E really is the note it looks like and it just sounds deep because it's a bass. No, it really is an octave lower sounding than that. So you don't write lower than this unless the bass player has like a 5-string bass that goes lower, or if they regularly tune their bass, they have an extension on an acoustic bass, or if they just tune that low string down to C or B, which some people do. But a 5-string bass will very often have a lower string on it, or there's what's called an extension that just lengthens that string. It's literally an extension physically on the bass that allows it to go lower than E. But yes, bass sounds an octave lower than written, so that is what you will generally see. Okay, so I believe that answers that question. I'm going to skip over Susan's for a moment and check out Doug's question about the playback. And yes, they're both going to play. So that's a good point. Let's listen to this. So we heard... That actually sounded kind of fun. but that's not right. It was hearing my playback as well as the trill playback. So what I can do is I can easily select these notes here, go to the properties panel, and turn off playback. So now we only hear the trill. All right, now we're only hearing the trill. If I undo that, and now if I only want to hear my playback and not the trill, ideally I could come over here and unclick play for the trill, and it would do the right thing. I'm not convinced it did. Yeah, I'm not convinced that did the right thing at all. Yeah, so I think that playback setting on trills, let me actually silence all these notes also and see what happens here. Okay, no, that did do the right thing then. It was just my illusion. So yeah, by turning off playback of the trill, it did actually just silence the trill. For some types of ornaments and markings, if you try unchecking the playback for that marking, it'll actually silence the whole note itself, which might be what you want. That's why I heard the problem, because I heard this C sharp and that D at the same time. So I would also want to turn off the playback of that C sharp. Now I should hear what I want. Oh, now I can turn the playback for these notes back on and finally hear what I want. Yeah, that's not too bad. So anyhow, you play around with the play setting on the properties to get the thing you want. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to come back to Susan's question about MuseScore 3 and entering Q notes. So yeah, so the process is going to be a little harder than in MuseScore 4, but not bad. In fact, it's not significantly different, really. It's just like a little harder to figure out. So if you've got a part and say this is the note here, and then you want to put in cues so that this person can see that their stuff comes in early, what you can do is enter the notes. Well, let's do it with a score, right? Let's use an actual score here. Control N and create a score here, and I'm going to make it just be for, I use MuseScore 3 so seldom I forget how to do things. It's going to be for flute and oboe. And so I've got an oboe note coming in on a C, and the flute has, and I want to give the oboe player some indication that the flute player is about to do that. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to copy these notes down to the oboe part, and then I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to come over to the inspector, and unfortunately I can't do it with all the notes selected at once in MuseScore 3. It's one of the limitations of that MuseScore 4 makes easier. In MuseScore 4 you could select that whole measure and the properties panel would show you all your options. In MuseScore 3 you have to do something fancier. You have to click those notes, click that measure to select it, then click the notes button. Now that the notes button is selected, now I can see the settings for the notes. And I want to do a couple of things. I want to turn off playback, which is kind of buried way down here instead of nicely at the top like it is in 4. Turn off playback, and then also I need to make them small. And instead of what you're going to see is, hey, there is a setting for small right here, note small. But look what it did. It just made the note heads small. You don't want that. You want in the chord section here to make them small. That will make the stems small also. So now you have notes that are both silent and small. And if I could play this, I don't think I can play it because I have MuseScore 4 open at the same. Oh, there you go. So it played the flute part, but not the oboe part for those notes. So that's how you do it. Now, here's the thing. If I then go to create parts, if I go to File, Parts, I'll create my parts, and there they are. So if I look at the oboe part, I see what I want to see, and all is well and good. But now what happens is I don't really want to see all that stuff in the score. This is something that eventually we want to fix, because MuseScore 4 doesn't handle this any better. But it will, right? Because MuseScore 3 is not going to get these sort of updates, but 4 will. I should probably make these not appear in the score. So what I'd have to do is make that stuff invisible. Now that it's invisible in the score, when I go to actually print this thing, there's going to just be a hole there, right? There's not even going to be a rest. So I'll have to go to another voice and enter in the other voice, enter a whole rest. So I switch to voice 2. To enter a whole rest, the way we do it is Control, Shift, Delete. And that's how you enter a whole rest. And then it's going to try to be smart and say, hey, there's stuff in the other voice, and so I'm going to move that rest down to be out of the way. MuseScore 4 is going to do a better job of this, but you'll just have to move it into position. I'm just hitting the up arrow to move it up a staff line at a time. So there's this whole kind of complex, and then it messed up the stem directions here, but that's okay. In fact, maybe if I just if I had left the rest alone, how does it look in the part? Let's see it in the part. Oboe part. Actually, this is not bad for the part, right? We want to see the rest below and the notes above, and that makes it a little more clear that it really is cues. So anyhow, that is the process. It's cumbersome. It's awkward. It's more awkward in MuseScore 3 than 4, but it's essentially the same process. MuseScore 4 just simplifies it because in 4, you have play and cue size right here at the top. So everything else is basically the same, but you can select a whole measure and have play and cue size right there. There's not all those extra steps involved. So, but the basic idea is the same. And Allison, thanks for the information. But yeah, what you want to do is you'll want to post into the community, create a thread where you give just all that information I mentioned. But let me read over it here because I don't think there's any other pending questions. And so I got a moment. I'm going to come back to Peter's and make sure I've really answered your question, or you could follow up if necessary. A bottle of beer complete with a crown cap? Okay. Early bassoon, double reed. Wow. Forerunner of the kirtle, which is another instrument I've never heard of before. Bottle of beer complete with a crown cap, crook, and a double reed. Serpent, wiggly, wooden mouthpiece. Wow, this is all new stuff. This is cool information. Earlier I mentioned the charango. For people who don't know, a charango is a traditional instrument that's based on like the Portuguese viola. I don't even know how you pronounce it. It's a Spanish/Portuguese instrument that the people who came over, the conquistadors and settlers and so forth, brought with them. And a lot of different guitar-like instruments are based on this particular one, including the ukulele. But the charango, very specifically, is traditionally made from an armadillo. It's literally an armadillo shell, because they, the indigenous people in the Andes, that we're talking Bolivia and so forth in the mountains, didn't have any way of like growing wood and figuring out how to bend it into that thing there. Into that shape, having like wood that would work as plywood, that you could bend that way, and didn't have the technology of doing, building complicated things like that. But they had armadillos, by gosh, and so they used armadillo shells and stuck a fretboard on it, and there was the charango. So electric bass, acoustic double bass, same range, yes, and same exact thing. It's the tuning is in fourths. It's E, A, D, G, and written range. It's let me get back to where I was. It's this written range for both electric and acoustic bass. Whoops, is that. And they all sound an octave lower than written. 5-string acoustic basses are rare-ish. It's like it's not super common that a bass player would have a 5-string acoustic bass. Most orchestral players do have that extension. So it'll still be a 4-string acoustic bass, double bass, contrabass. Acoustic bass is only a term only used in the jazz world to differentiate it from electric, but the normal term is just double bass or contrabass. And so it'll have 4 strings. Most professional orchestral players will have that extension so that low E string is actually longer. It extends beyond, like, into the pegboard, into the tuning pegs. And so it goes up there and allows that to be tuned. And then it has like a capo-ish kind of thing, so that or it could. There's different models. I've seen them, but I don't know all the details. But in any case, a typical orchestral bass player will have the ability to go down to C, possibly B if they tune it that way. But electric bass players, I mean, the traditional electric basses are also 4-string, but man, 5 and 6-string electric basses are super common as well. And a 5-string will typically have a lower string, a 6-string might have a lower and a higher string. It all depends on the specific model of instrument. But yeah, 5-string acoustic basses, pretty uncommon. 5-string electric basses, super common. All right, new question from Tom. And Tom, yeah, speaking of newbies, so here's something I want to do. And I'll take I can do a poll. This is such a thing. I can do a poll right now. I'm going to do a poll right now. I thought I could do polls in here. I don't see the poll button. Am I missing it? No, maybe there's not a poll button in chat on live streams. Oh, well. I'm going to do a poll in the community later, but let me tell you what I'm thinking. Like these Ask Me Anything sessions, I imagine they're very useful for a lot of people, right? And I also do the third Wednesday score of the month session where I just enter music, and it's interesting because it like is a cross section of all sorts of different MuseScore features. And so that's often interesting, but we often get deep into the woods of like complicated things. How do you do this thing here that I run into right away? And so those tend to be kind of advanced sessions, even though they start really simple with let's create a score, let's go into node input mode. They often get deep fast. I want to have a regular series of beginner sessions. So that is my plan. It's not a plan yet, but it's an idea, and so I'm going to run it past people with a poll and see what people think about this, and make that a regular feature. And I've got a couple of other ideas for things like that. All right. Oh, the Octobase. Yeah, that is a crazy thing also, and it's huge, right? Okay. So should edits to project properties be reflected in the header? Nope. Not a thing. Not a thing in any version. So project properties is metadata for the score. This is just actual edited data. So if I want to change the title to my cool title, that is that. That is what shows in the score. But if I go to project properties, it still is just this generic information here. So I would have to change this. And now I'm going to make another change. My cool metadata. Just to make another point. I got my title here, my metadata there. If I'm going to add some more measures so I get another page. I got my page here. I didn't actually need to do that. If I now go to Format, Style, Header, and Footer, and I say that I want the footer to have the title in it. I'm going to put the title, I'll put it in the header. I'll put it in the middle of the header. And as soon as I hover my mouse over this thing, I get this like list of all the fancy metadata things I can do. One of them is the title. So I can make the title, but you have to like read fast to find the dang thing. Is anyone seeing it? I want to say it's got to be $T, but I'm not seeing it in here. File name, gosh dang it. It's like, this is like one of the more frustrating things that's been this way in MuseScore forever. There's got to be a better way of doing this, right? So I don't know if there is $T. I'm not seeing $T, but what I do know is I can do $: title, and then colon again, all right? So I do that, I hit OK, and notice, did I not do it? Format, style. Did I get that wrong? See, I don't do this very often, obviously. It's not really title. Oh, it's work title. It's work title. It's not title. It's work title. Yeah, this whole system dates from the 80s. I mean, not in MuseScore, but it's like 80s type technology. And obviously, I still have something wrong. $T. Thank you. I just couldn't find that quickly enough when I'm under pressure here. So let's try that again. Just $T. And no, it's not. In any case, that would show the metadata title, not this title. So no, they are not connected in any way. It would be cool if they were. It'd be cool if you could just put in, $: title here and get it to work. Did I enter it in the wrong place in project properties? That could be. Why? Because I want to get this title working. Work title. My cool metadata. but now it's metadata. So my work title, my cool metadata. Now let's go back to format, style. Oh, it's only on odd pages, but not showing on the first page. That's me. That's silly me. So let's turn this option off again. So do you notice that what I just did there? The header has an option to show on the first page or not show on the first page. It also has an option to have a different header for odd or even pages. The default setting was such that what I did wasn't visible because this would have only showed, that $T would have only showed on the odd number pages like the first one, but the first page was disabled. Now let's see if $T works. Ha! No, it doesn't. It gives me a header, but it just says $T. So clearly that wasn't it. But if I go back one more time and this say $: work title colon. Try yet again. There it is, finally, my header. My cool metadata, which is not my cool title, right? So someday, yes, there will be a system that ties them together, but it just hasn't happened. Yeah, so the subtitle business, let me show you the two things without going into that field and adding a space. Yeah, you can totally delete the subtitle after the fact. That's the thing. So let me just do that, and then I'll wrap this up. So when you're creating a new score, if you go to where it says next, what you do here is type a space and then delete the space, and then the subtitle disappears. And now when you get your new score, it doesn't have a default subtitle. If you don't do that and you have a subtitle, just click the thing and press delete. It goes away. The idea, this was a MuseScore 4 feature the head designer thought would be a good idea because too many people were not able to figure out how to add the subtitle. He says, well, if we just do it by default, it's usually to figure out how to delete it than how to add it. I might have made a different call, but it was a deliberate decision because for that reason, basically. All right. The part title, not title. Yep, you're absolutely right. That is what's going on with the $T. And so that's for parts. Okay. Add to the small text frame. Yeah, and all these things would totally make sense. You're absolutely right that it would make sense for the title in the title frame, the composer, the lyricist, all that information would make sense to have a way of having that tied to the project metadata and letting one update the other, or at least having it initially pre-fill that way. Lots of things would make sense for the future, but no, it's not that way now. All right, I got to wrap things up. So I'm going to thank everyone for being here, and sorry if I missed any questions towards the end, but I don't know that I did. I think I'm actually pretty good here. Anyhow, this has been the Ask Me Anything session of MuseScore Café, and yeah, next week, I'm probably going to try to do this beginner session next week. We'll see how it goes. But tomorrow will be Music Masterclass. We're going to just do some more of this sort of ear training thing and looking at some more music that some people have submitted that I haven't looked at yet. We will start the Counterpoint course soon. Like I said, I just got to get my ducks in a row to make sure that all site glitch weirdnesses are kind of settled before I'm comfortable saying I'm ready to launch a course. But expect that soon, and it's going to be really cool. It's going to be really fun. It's a new adventure for so many people, and I think you're just going to love what you learn to do in the Counterpoint course. So I hope you all are able to sign up and do that when I make that announcement. Thanks, everyone. Had fun today. I'll catch you next time. Bye.